All righty. Hey, everybody. Hello, folks. Welcome to Can Advisors New York webinar. Today, we're going to be talking about winning in the Empire State. We're just right at the top of the hour right now. Hope everyone had a good lunch break in New York. We'll give people a few minutes to sort of trickle in here before we get going. Hope everyone's having a good summer thus far and had a wonderful 4th of July. And we're getting kind of back into the swing of things now after, taking a little time to enjoy the holidays. Definitely exciting with New York to be ramping up here and finally chugging along after a lot of waiting we've been doing in New York. So sorry to make you wait here a couple minutes before we get started after all that New York waiting. We'll just get going on a couple of sort of admin things before we dive into the bulk of the presentation. This presentation, of course, is going to be recorded, so anyone who registered will get the recording sent around afterwards. Even if you have to hop out early, even if if you're not here, which I don't know how you could hear me if you're not here, we'll still send the recording around if you did register so that you can listen later. Feel free to refer back to anything, and feel free to reach out to us at any time with any questions. For the presentation, we're going to have a question and answer period at the end. We'll save the last 10 or 15 minutes for questions, so go ahead and submit those throughout, and we'll come back to those later. And if you have any questions after the presentation as well, feel free to reach out to us with any of those questions too. All right, we're a few minutes past, so let's go ahead and kind of jump into things now. Hello, officially, my name's Summer Thomas. I'm the Director of Regulatory Operations here at Canna Advisors. Thank you so much for joining. Really appreciate you all taking your time to chat about New York with us here for the next hour. As I mentioned, the title of the presentation today is Winning in the Empire State, New York Licensing and Launch. Again, this presentation will be recorded and we'll send it around afterwards. Please feel free to submit any questions as we go along, and we'll circle back around to those at the end. So I'll hop into some introductions here. Canna Advisors, if you don't know about us, we're a cannabis business consultancy, and we specialize in competitive license applications, startup services, general business planning services. We're based in Boulder, Colorado. We do have an office in the Empire State Building in New York. Though we're based in Colorado, we mainly work nationwide. Since 2012, we've worked with clients in 38 states and internationally. So pretty much anywhere there's a legal cannabis market in the US, we've done some work there. Our company was started over 10 years ago, so a long time ago in the cannabis industry. Our founders, Jay and Diane Zarkowski, started one of the first medical cannabis businesses in Boulder, Colorado. And once they got out of that business, pivoted into licensing on the East Coast, actually, and we've been doing that now for over 10 years. Joining me today is our project manager, Dalton Villette. Dalton is a certifiable expert in all things New York cannabis. He's been working specifically with New York clients on conditional and annual license pursuits. Sorry, give me one sec. Little technical difficulty popped up here. Okay, as long as you can all still see and hear me, I think we're fine. But I just logged in. I just logged in again on another window somehow. I don't know how I did that. My hands are here in my pockets. But as I was saying, Dalton's been working with New York clients on conditional and their full annual license pursuits, along with tons of financial modeling and business planning. His professional cannabis experience goes back to 2017 when he worked on Phil Murphy's gubernatorial campaign. Worked on that cannabis legalization language on the campaign trail. So great to see that come to fruition finally. Dalton also has his master's in law from Colorado University with a focus on ethics and compliance. Dalton's also worked in healthcare, privacy, and digital advertising prior to his work at Canna Advisors. And then, as I mentioned, my name's Summer Thomas. I'm our Director of Regulatory Operations. I oversee all of our consulting work, licensing work here at Canna Advisors. I've worked with cannabis regulations in dozens of states. I'm a licensed attorney. I have years of experience helping to launch legal cannabis businesses. I have somewhat of a broad perspective, having worked here at Canna Advisors for 5 years now. Really have seen a lot of changes of the landscape, the market here in the cannabis industry. Really like to apply a critical eye towards solving business issues. You know, the more complex the problem, the better, and we'll get through it together. I got my law degree from the University of Florida, and my background is in tax, business, and administrative law, as well as somewhat in sales and marketing as well. I'm a member of the National Cannabis Industry Association, which I love, part of the state regulations committee there. I'm in the NCIA. If you're not part of the NCIA, please consider joining. It's a great organization. Also, I'm part of the International Cannabis Bar Association. And I love to volunteer for Expunge Colorado. So if you do happen to be in the Colorado area, or if you're interested in expungement, definitely reach out if you want to do any advocacy work there. Or helping out with legal expungements. All right, that's enough about me for sure. And I think enough intros. So let's move down kind of into the content, into the New York meat of it here. So for this presentation, we're going to talk mostly about, we're going to talk about where we've been. We're going to talk about where we are now in New York. We're going to talk about where we're going, and then we're going to touch on what you can be doing now to ready yourself to be best prepared for the application and for upcoming operations. So let's start off now with just where we've been. It's quite the long drama with the state of New York rolling out their cannabis program. We can't possibly touch on all the things that have happened and the myriad of headlines and stories and things that have gone on as this program has rolled out, but we'll touch on the top points of it, and maybe even remind you of a few things you forgot that happened over the years. So as I'm sure you all know, New York had a functioning medical marijuana market, though somewhat limited, that's been operating since around 2014. Then we have the Marijuana Regulation and Tax Act, which was signed into law March of 2021. So that's now over 2 years ago, we had the Marijuana Regulation Tax Act, MRTA, signed into law. And if you remember, we had a governor change in the midst of that initial rollout, right? We went from, Como was the one to sign the initial bill, and then we had Hochul come on and really get the program up and running. Municipalities had until December of 2021 to opt out. And actually found, I think it wound up being around 30 or 40% that opted out, but it was many less than in neighboring New Jersey, which was something over 70%. Also keep in mind that those municipalities can always opt back into retail sales or consumption if they choose to in the future. So the Office of Cannabis Management was created, and that's governed by the Cannabis Control Board, and they're the ones that are regulating the adult use, medical, and hemp cannabis markets. The office has been issuing licenses and developing regulations over the past several months. We know that we had the proposed regulations. Well, let's see. Last year we had the advertising and marketing, packaging and labeling and testing regulations released first. Those were the initial. And then late last year, we had the rest of the proposed regulations finally unveiled. It was really starting to feel like the boy who cried wolf with that one. It was like 2 more months. No, 2 more months. They're going to be out. They're going to be out. And finally, they did come out. So great to have those and be able to dig into the proposed regulations. Those have been put into the register and they're now in a public comment period. That public comment period ends July 31st. And then the newest legislation in May, the governor signed into law the omnibus budget bill that curbs illegal and illicit markets. So essentially allowing some things like, enforcement against the illegally operating or unlicensed cannabis businesses that are popping up all over the place in New York. I heard apparently there was a raid of Empire Cannabis Club yesterday. Looked like they had to close up shop in a couple locations, but it was just for the day and looks like they're back up and running again today. So we'll just wait to get more information on what's going on there. And that's pretty much where we stand right now. We do have some information on some upcoming timelines that we're looking for. Labor Day is the one big date that we're kind of looking towards. And we'll get more into that in a minute. We'll get into sort of the future looking, what's coming up next down the road, what other dates you should be keeping in mind as we move forward. So that kind of gets us to where we are right now. We have the proposed regulations. We then have the revised regulations that came out in May. We have the new omnibus budget bill for enforcement crackdowns on unlicensed shops. And right now we're just sort of waiting for Labor Day for that comment period to end on July 31st, and then the final regulations to be released. Okay, so with all of that information about background, let's dive into the regulations themselves. Let's talk a bit about the application process and what we can expect from these initial proposed and revised regulations. And for that, let me turn it over to my co-host here, Dalton Villette, to tell you a little bit more about the application process.
Thank you very much, Summer. So we do have some initial insight about what is going to be anticipated on the application itself and how individuals who are interested in pursuing various license types will be facing when they actually log into the online portal. So actually, the very first thing I want to discuss is the online portal itself. We do know from the past conditional licenses, those conditional cultivators, processors, and the card licenses, those conditional retail dispensary licenses, that there is going to be an online portal. That's where you will create an account, log in, and upload all of the necessary information into this application portal. That includes a lot of different plans that we'll be diving into, along with a lot of information related to individuals who are going to be appearing on the application itself in an active role in the business. What we don't know is some of the specific criteria in the application itself, such as formatting. So there's a lot of different plans that are going to be requested of the prospective applicants in this application portal. And right now, we don't know if there's going to be specific formatting requirements for these. This can be related to type font. We don't know if the Office of Cannabis Management is going to request all documents be consistent in, let's say, Helvetica or Calibri or Times New Roman. We have seen this in other states, so it's not unheard of. I believe it would be safe to say this is probably unlikely, but you never know in a state like New York. We also don't know with all of the different plans that they are requesting if there's going to be page limits. And this would be something that's very surprising considering we've not seen page limits for the past conditional licenses. But again, you just never know with New York. And as far as the application window itself goes, we don't know if the application window is going to be opening and accepting all license types, or if it's going to be a staggered process. There are a number of different states who have staggered application windows. So the very first window could be specifically geared towards cultivators, and then they close that window, open another window for processors, close that, and so on and so forth. There is the possibility too that they will open up the application window and anyone, regardless of license type, will be able to apply. So it won't matter if you're applying for a retail license, a delivery license, consumption facility, or cultivator license, you'll be able to apply and submit all of the materials on the very first date. And that is something that we are recommending people take into consideration. It doesn't appear at this point in time that there's going to be a definite closing date of the application window. It looks like they're going to be reviewing these applications on a rolling basis. So if you can, definitely look at getting all of your application materials ready to submit on the very first day that the application window opens. We had seen previously with the conditional licenses a specific window of time, and they were not reviewing the applications until that window closed. So you had a bit of leeway until that final day to actually submit your materials. This looks a little bit different, so we definitely recommend to start getting things in order now. We do know at least that there is going to be a 30-day notice period for any of the license types for when the application window is going to be opening. So you're not going to wake up and suddenly be surprised with an application window, or at least I hope you won't be. You will be able to have that 30-day notice to start gathering all of your materials in advance of the application window opening. And we also know that there is going to be priority in the grading process itself. Whether that means kind of similar to the staggered application window type, that individuals who qualify as a social and economic equity applicant will be able to submit their materials earlier. We don't know, but we do know that social and economic equity applicants and those who meet the criteria for such will have their applications reviewed faster and with a priority compared to other non-social and economic equity applicants. And there are also some additional benefits for applying and meeting the considerations as a social and economic equity applicant, which we'll be diving into a little bit later on the phone call. And I think with that, we can look at some of the required plans. And as you can see on this slide, there are quite a few documents that we've identified in the regulations so far that are going to be required for this application. I won't go through and name every single one of these, but as you can see, there are a substantial number of them that focus on community impacts, site plans, property plans, diversity plans, and requiring an employee handbook and a delivery plan, depending on what your business type is going to be. And that's what's really important with all of these different plans, is really being able to identify which license type that you are going to be pursuing, because some of the requirements are going to be different. Let's say you are going to be pursuing a retail license with the delivery option, you'll need to have a delivery plan. But if you are a cultivator who is going to be applying for that license type, you would not need a delivery plan. Instead, you would need to focus on distribution, because delivery is geared towards individual applicants who are going to be delivering towards individual customers throughout the city or the state. A distribution plan is geared towards distributing cannabis product from one cannabis business type to another. So it is important to make sure that you have all of these plans buttoned down, ironed out, and tailor-made for the application prior to submission. All of the applications that are going to be received do come with an application fee, and that's going to be a $1,000 non-refundable application fee. And depending on the license type that you're going to be pursuing, that will determine what the licensing fee will be. And you don't need to worry, you don't need to submit this fee at the onset. This would be required post-licensure. but it does vary considerably. It depends on if you're going to be a retailer, that licensing fee is going to be around $7,000, or a cultivator, let's say one with 10,000 square feet of indoor canopy, that licensing fee is going to be substantially higher. The benefit too with applying for and receiving social and economic equity status is these application and licensing fees can either be completely waived, deferred, or reduced by half. So if you are able to submit your application as a social and economic equity applicant, there's a lot of benefits to doing so, such as the potential reduction in these fees and having your application reviewed in a more expeditious manner than other applicants who do not meet that criteria. And I think that about covers everything here. And as you can see, here are some of the license types specifically. We have a lot of the more standard license types, and I'm going to let Summer dive into the details on some of the more unique ones that we've seen in New York.
Great, thanks, Dalton. All right, so let's dive into some of those license types that you can apply for. You can see the whole laundry list there. Some of our normal, our usual suspects there: cultivation, processor, retail, dispensary. Those are ones that we're seeing all over the place and in other states. Delivery also is fairly common. Nursery, though, the first one there listed is one that we don't often see. That's going to be a license that allow you to sell wee little baby plants. And so you'll be able to help the cultivators get going. It'll allow for increased genetics and a lot of focus on, the initial stages of cultivation there in the nursery. Micro businesses, very interesting. Micro businesses are the only full vertical allowed, other than our, exceptions for the medical, the ROD licenses, and those micro businesses, like I said, can be cultivation, processing, and retail dispensing. This New York market is modeled a lot after the alcohol industry and the alcohol model, where retail and production are separated from each other. So there are a lot of different things you'll see throughout these regulations for the allowance for holding multiple licenses. That's just trying to keep retail activities totally separate from production and manufacturing activities. I think we famously heard that if you own a cultivation license in New York and you have you can't also have a dispensary on Mars. So well, that was pretty interesting there. We'll see how that plays out with any Martian travel. We have cooperative and collective licenses also available here. Distributor licenses, that's going to be for moving product between, like Dalton said, between licensees, as well as storing the product. We have then retail dispensaries. Retail dispensaries can also have a limited retail consumption area included. Then the separate delivery license, and then the RON. So that's the medical licenses, are registered organizations that are either non-dispensing or dispensing licenses there. So those are all of the types available. There are also within those license types some separate subcategories. So within cultivation, separate subcategories, and same within processor. So if you are interested in those license types, be sure to dig in and figure out exactly what kind you want. What size, what type of lighting you might be using for your facility. Okay, so then one more thing to touch on then with these licensing here specifically are the provisional licenses. And this is something new that's just come out in the revised regulations from New York. The provisional license is a type of license that can be available for an applicant if they don't have a property. So if you don't have a facility, you don't have an address, a lease, you don't have any sort of documentation evidencing a property that you're proposing to use for your business, you can still apply for the provisional license. Now, keep in mind that the provisional license doesn't authorize license activity. So you're not a full licensee. You can't go out and start cultivating. You can't sell product. You can't process. You won't be able to do any of those things with your provisional license. The provisional license is going to do is just sort of let you submit and get your foot in the door, and get your initial approval from the board with certain conditions. The board's then going to give you additional conditions that you'll have to meet, specifically regarding property, of course. And then if there are any other deficiencies, the state or the board's going to allow you to cure those deficiencies. And as long as you apply or you submit your property information within a year of getting your initial board approval, you'll be able to convert your provisional license over to the final or the full license. We've somewhat internally slipped into calling this the annual license, though that's not exactly what they call it in New York, but that is what they call it in New Jersey. New Jersey actually had a very similar process. So they had a conditional license application and an annual license application. The conditional differences being mostly the same, as they didn't require any property. So the property is a huge barrier to entry. To be able to hold a property, to be able to pay rent on a property, or even just an option contract to hold it down, is a big barrier to entry. So this provisional license allows you to get started, get that initial licensure, and then give you time to look for a property. Like I said, this is similar to New Jersey, and what we learned there is that finding a property is tough, right? It's not something to procrastinate on. Yes, you can apply without a proposed property. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, though it is an option. And if you can't find a property, then absolutely do that, just to get your foot in the door and to get moving and keep that momentum going. But if you can get a property, I think definitely submit that and get in there for full licensure. Because in New Jersey, we just found people who they were able to get the conditional license, but then they weren't able to find a property, or they weren't able to then find investors. So they were just stalled later in the process. So they'd already put a lot of money and work into it to not be able to then find a property when they needed it, because most of the best properties had been gobbled up already. So just make sure you're quick there and competitive on finding a property. But keep in mind that provisional license is an option. I know I've been a little confusing probably with the terminology, but not to be confused. The provisional license is one that doesn't require a property. A conditional license in New York is what they issued for the conditional cultivators and processors last year, as well as the conditional retail licenses. Those were the hemp cultivators and processors, and then our justice involved retailers. That's what we call conditional in New York. So provisional is different than conditional in New York. And then provisional is very similar to conditional in New Jersey. So if that didn't confuse you, feel free to send us any questions later. One more thing for the provisional licenses. For the provisional licenses, you'll only need to pay your license fee at full licensure. So I said you'll submit your provisional license application. You'll get an initial board approval, a preliminary board approval. At that point, you won't have to pay your license fee, that full thousands of dollars Dalton was talking about, not until you submit all of your materials and you get your full licensure, then you'll have to pay the license fee for that. So that I think that covers it for the provisional. Dalton, did I miss anything there? Anything else to note about license types or the provisionals?
No, I think you covered everything, but I would just mention that with the provisional license, similar to kind of what Summer was mentioning, you will still need to submit plans such as a property plan, a site plan, once you actually have the property in place. Those are required so you can actually convert to that full license. So just because you're going the provisional route doesn't mean you get to entirely avoid submitting those plans. They might not be required, let's say, at the early onset of the application process, but they would still be required nonetheless.
Right. Yes. Very good. Very good to note. Yeah. It's not you're not just skipping those steps. You're just doing them a little bit later on. Okay, great. Well, then let's talk a little bit more about these priority applications. I think I actually didn't mention it in the provisional, but the provisional licenses may be evaluated sooner than some other license types. The state does have that option to review the provisional licenses sooner, along with these other priority license types, such as the social and economic equity applicants. So let's turn and talk a bit more about those. So a social and economic equity applicant can get you some priority in the application process. In order to qualify for that, you have to have sole control of the business by a minority, a woman, a distressed farmer, a military service disabled veteran, one of those, and it has to be, like I said, solely controlled. So that means that at least 51% ownership has to be by that group, as well as there are several other requirements, but ability to exercise authority over the day-to-day business operations, add members to the board and to the company, and just overall controlling of the corporate structure. So that person does have to have control of the business in order to qualify for that social and economic equity status. And then in addition to that, so that's our first level. And then second, you can get the the extra priority. I love their term, extra priority, makes you feel real special. For those folks that can demonstrate that they're in a community that was disproportionately impacted by the enforcement of cannabis. So that's already a lot, but they actually have to comply with a couple other provisions. They have to have an income lower than 80% of the median in their county, and also have to be convicted of a cannabis related offense. So really tough to make that high bar for the extra priority. Also, if you're a family member, you can qualify as well for that extra priority if you meet all of those through a family member. Yeah, so all right, so the social equity applicants also, I think maybe Dalton mentioned this earlier, but they can get a 50% reduction or waiver or deferred fee for application or license fees. So that's great for social equity applicants. Another thing that's good for social equity applicants, if they fail to meet requirements, they will have the chance to cure. It seems the state's taking, maybe some extra resources or putting some extra help towards the social and economic equity applicants and their deficiencies. And we'll be addressing those first, so that if you do get a deficiency, you'll have the chance to cure. And then also if you get a negative determination, so if you submit your materials to cure and you're still not able to be awarded the license, then you can apply again in just 30 days. So you can take what you've learned from that application period and that first application and apply again with the new updated information, whatever it was that you needed to add there. So that's good. Seems like it'll be some of an iterative process for those social equity applicants. For the social equity applicants, it's a little bit unclear on the grading advantages. Order has been pretty strongly, I would say strongly inferred from the regulations that they're going to get some sort of grading advantage when it comes to our evaluation advantage in the order. Again, I'll refer to New Jersey, where New Jersey prioritized, they gave a list in descending order of how they would be grading the applications, where they said, there's this top level, we'll grade all of these first, then we'll grade all of this level, then all of this level next. One complaint I had from that process was a lack of transparency and just not knowing exactly, okay, well, which level are they at with their grading process now? How do we be sure which group we fall into? It is possible to qualify for more than one of the social equity groups. So, to be sure if your application is qualifying for the top level of the group and evaluated first, it was just a little bit lack of transparency there in New Jersey. So hopefully we see more transparency in New York for how they're grading these, how they're evaluating, what the process will be. Because we had applicants who were waiting several months just to hear back from the state and just having to keep follow up to figure out what the status was of their application. So hopefully we see that coming along a little bit quicker here in New York. One thing that they're They have said is they're going to have what they would call groupings. That's essentially the categories I was mentioning for extra priority, social and economic equity, provisional licenses as well, maybe in one of these groupings. They can also group them by regional or license type as well. So we're not sure yet what the order will be on these groupings, but the state does have that ability to look at certain applications before others. And then lastly, for social and economic equity, just even if you're not a social and economic equity applicant, that commitment is required for all applicants, and that'll be in your community impact plan. So even if you're not specifically a social equity applicant, you'll want to make sure that you have a strong community impact plan and you're thinking of ways that you can give back to these disproportionately impacted areas. All right, I think that covers us for the provisional license. And before I turn it over to you, Dalton, for regulatory changes, anything else to add there?
I would just say the extra priority is also there. It seems like from information gathered from the regulations themselves, this is there specifically to help a lot of the prospective card applicants who might have not received licensure. These requirements are very similar to those who qualified as justice-involved individuals. New York has had that cap for the card licenses. Initially, it was 150 licenses. Then it was expanded to 300. So a lot of applicants, because the Office of Cannabis Management received just over 900 applications, a lot of those prospective card applicants will not be able to receive a card license. That doesn't mean you can't apply again for this full license, and more than likely you'd be able to qualify as an extra priority applicant.
All right, great. Thanks, Dalton. All right, well, with these all this regulatory talk, let's talk a little bit more then about the proposed regulations versus our new revised regulations that we recently received.
Yeah, thank you, Summer. And this is a great opportunity because we're still seeing a lot of information out there that has now, as we know, become dated because it's relying on information and guidelines that we had received from the Office of Cannabis Management way back in November of last year, but we have seen quite a bit of updates in the revised regulations. We're in that second public comment period for these revised regulations. So between now and the end of the month, you can reach out to the Office of Cannabis Management and notify them of any sort of additional changes you'd like to see for these revised regulations before they finalize the regulations at or around that Labor Day date. But we have seen an expansion of the regulations themselves from the initial proposed regulations that we got last year. And some of the biggest additions that we saw were related to additional license types. We got a lot more information on delivery and consumption facility licenses. We always knew that these license types were going to be available for individuals to pursue, but we didn't have a lot of details about these specific license types. So now with the revised regulations, we know how many people can you employ for delivery services, how much cannabis product can a delivery person actually have on their person as they're making delivery runs? Can you actually use public transportation or bikes or scooters or just walk to a delivery point? Yes, you can. And we also got some additional information on the consumption facilities. And this is an important thing to note with a consumption facility license. It's important to note that this is not necessarily a consumption lounge. So you can pursue this license as a retail dispensary and have a designated area for consuming cannabis products purchased at the dispensary itself. But individuals, namely restaurants, can also pursue a consumption facility license and then serve infused products such as infused beverages or infused food items. So you don't have to have the retail dispensary license if you're interested in purely serving infused foods or beverage products, for instance. We also got a lot of clarification on some of the different requirements. namely the true parties of interest requirements and updates to the registered organization timelines. We saw an expansion of the true party of interest requirements. So we were able to see that to qualify as a true party of interest, or a TPI, initially, all you had to do to be qualified for this and be regarded as an active investor was to receive or give $100,000 to the applicant themselves. So let's say you're an investor and you are going to be receiving $100,000 from the applicant because of your initial investment. You would be regarded as a true party of interest. That $100,000 mark has actually been increased to $250,000. So if you know you're going to be investing in a cannabis business for less than $250,000, you may be regarded as a passive investor. And that would mean that you are not qualified as a true party of interest. It just means that the applicant themselves would not need to include a lot of additional information about you on the application itself, such as background checks, fingerprints, and information related to that. We also got some updates and clarifications on the timeline for these registered organizations, these current medical operations. Initially, there was going to be a 2-year window that individual applicants that were non-registered organizations were going to have to kind of get a head start in the business before these registered organizations can come in and begin selling products in the adult use market. Unfortunately, that timeline has actually been shortened significantly. So we will be seeing these medical organizations coming in and being able to convert to these full licenses in the adult use market at the end of this year. It does also bolster confidence that these application windows will be happening before the end of the year, because we do have specific December dates for these registered organizations to begin actually selling products in the adult use market. And finally, with these regulatory changes, we saw a couple of different plans that we had mentioned previously see substantial overhauls with, none more specifically than the energy and environmental plan. In the previous round of regulations, this was a fairly lengthy plan. All of the requirements included in it surpassed 8 pages long. We've now seen this plan and all of its requirements be reduced to just about 2 pages in the regulations. And alongside that, we saw some of the requirements for this energy and environmental plan be modified. Originally, it was expressly prohibited for indoor cultivators to use carbon dioxide generators for their facilities. We have now seen that rolled back, and indoor cultivators will be able to utilize generators that emit carbon dioxide. So these are just some of the things to bear in mind as you are compiling your different plans, such as your energy and environmental plan, and all of the different details on what is going to be required within these documents that you submit. And I think we can look forward to what is going to be happening next in New York State.
Awesome. Thanks, Dalton. Yeah, that sets us up nicely. So now we know, what our application sections look like, our different license types, what's changed over the last several months here with our new regulations. And now let's look at what's going on looking forward, get out our crystal ball here and look towards September. I mentioned earlier that Labor Day is a big date that we're looking towards now. This is actually not in the law, but it was discussed at the May 11th board meeting, and that they anticipated the finalized regulations and application window would be open on or around Labor Day. As Dalton mentioned earlier, they are required to give a 30-day heads up for the application period to open. So the final regulations may be released, the application itself may come out, but that application window or application period isn't going to open for at least 30 days after that. So you will have some notice with the application in hand to get prepared for whatever those specific requirements are. As the application itself is going to be, it always is slightly different from what we've seen in the regulations. So it'll be great to have that in hand. As I mentioned, July 31st is the end of the public comment period for the revised regulations. So that's giving the state about a month to revise the regulations and get that to revise their revised regulations and get the final version out around Labor Day. Let's see, a couple other just future dates I'll whiz through here to keep in mind. In December 2023, the distance requirements between dispensaries, registered organizations, and micro business ceases to be a requirement, though you may still have local zoning restrictions. So keep that in mind. But just so you know, some of those more restrictive distance requirements are gonna cease to be an issue at the end of this year. Also, at the end of the year, Dalton mentioned this one, registered organizations are going to be allowed to open up recreational shops. And that was a change that was quicker than we thought it was going to be. So I think, even more important to just get out there and get into the market as soon as you possibly can. And then let's see, one more thing for the registered organizations. They're allowed to open their second and third recreational shops June of next year. So they would only get to have one shop at the end of this year. So, all right. So going forward, then our big date to look forward to is Labor Day. And my God, it is coming up so quickly. We're already halfway through July. If you have a vacation you need to get in before the application period, you better get that vacation in now because we're coming up quickly. Just 6 weeks until the final regulations are slated to be released. So anything you can do to prepare now, obviously, crucially important. I know there are lots of folks that have been chomping at the bit for 2 years to get going on this application. And if you're lazy, if you're off binge watching Netflix right now because you've been waiting for New York, now's the time really to get going on final preparations and getting all the ducks in a row. So with that said, Dalton, what are some specific things we can be doing now to get ready for the application?
Thank you, Summer. So there's a number of different things that individuals can be doing right now. So if you're still looking for investors, you're still looking to have some liquidity available for you to actually get the business off the ground and running, now is a perfect opportunity to begin financial modeling, securing a pitch deck, starting any sort of brand development that might be required, not just for the application itself, but also for investor purposes and for brand recognition. Now is a very good time to begin this process so you can present to the Office of Cannabis Management a very detailed, thorough business plan on what you're going to be doing, how you're going to be doing it, and how you're going to have the funds to make this mission and dream of yours possible. So these are all different services that CanAdvisors is able to offer and provide for individuals. So be sure to reach out to us if you are interested in financial modeling or pitch deck or brand development. Happy to help you there to get these investors on board for your vision. As far as looking at a different facility, as Summer and I have mentioned previously, you don't need to have a property. You can still apply for that provisional license. But we still would recommend that if you are able to secure a property prior to the application window, that you do so, just so you don't have to go through that conversion process, because right now we just don't know how long of a process that will be to convert from the provisional license to that full licensure. We also know now is an opportune time to begin meeting individuals, not only in the cannabis business, but if you have a general area that you know that you're going to be operating out of, get to know and begin supporting local businesses, local and state nonprofit organizations. We've already had a lawsuit from a prospective Harlem dispensary where individuals in the community sued this applicant because they contested that the individual did not do enough community involvement and engagement. So we do know there are risks with kind of shutting the community out. Now is the time to begin raising awareness of your interest, that you want to open a dispensary here, that you're looking at having this cultivation facility located in a specific area. Don't be a stranger. Make yourself known to these nonprofits and these local businesses and begin gathering letters of support, which you can submit to the Office of Cannabis Management alongside all of the application materials. And finally, looking at people. This is a great time to begin identifying people that you know you want to have on your team. We always think it's good to have a holistic approach to hiring people for your business. So you want to have people who not only have business expertise, but also have cannabis experience. So that way you can have the full gamut of people who are going to be making your business thrive once it does have the license in hand. And this also means spending time for those individuals that you know are going to be on your team and are going to be appearing on the application, gathering all the necessary information for them as a true party of interest. So that means gathering fingerprints, doing background checks for individuals, financial disclosure documentation, and contact information for each of these different individuals. And you can also go ahead and begin identifying some key vendors that you know you're going to be utilizing pre-licensure, such as a local attorney, or post-licensure, such as an architect, a designer, or a security vendor too. So I would say these are all the different options that you can be doing right now prior to the application window actually opening up.
Perfect. Yeah, that's all great information to know there, Dalton. And then one thing I'll add to that, I know we're getting close to the end of time here and I want to leave some for questions, but another thing to do now is to just educate yourself, make sure you're staying in the loop, and continue to advocate at the state level and also especially at your local community level now. For those local ordinances, you do have, you may have the opportunity to help craft those, in a favorable way. So definitely be involved in educating and advocating. One place you can turn for resources is the Canna Advisors blog. We have dozens of articles up there on New York specifically. We have a whole series that specifically covers each of cultivation, processing, and retail license types, and tips and tricks how to win a license for each of those. So check out the Canna Advisors site for information. Definitely follow us on social media to stay up to date on any application and licensing news. The OCM also on their website has a page where you can sign up for notifications. So you can just enter your email there and get notifications straight from the OCM. A few others that we always follow, New York Cannabis Insider is a great one, run by Brad Racino. Jeff Hoffman's Ask Me Anythings are great to catch for some information as well. And then Marijuana Moment, that's just our normal morning read for the cannabis industry. So be reading that if you're not, just to stay up to date on things. And then as far as events, Canna Advisors coming up, Jay Zarkowski, our co-founder, is going to be speaking in Las Vegas at the Cannabis Business Times Cannabis Conference on creating a winning license application. And then let's see, Dalton and I will be at Cannabis Industry Journal's Cannabis Quality Conference in October, Parsippany, New Jersey, I believe, if you'd like to see us there. And just anytime you'd like to meet up in New York, reach out and we'll set up a time to meet up in New York. And I think that about does it, and we can move on into questions. Let's see, do we have any questions from our... Yes, we do. All right, let's see. First question here. Is it possible to apply for the dispensary license without having your funding in place at time of submission?
So I can take that one, Summer. So
okay.
You do not need to showcase like a bank account with $1 million in cash. That is not a requirement. We have seen some other states where that is a requirement. You had to show a large amount of funds available, but you can also submit additional materials such as a letter of intent or a promissory note from any investors that you have that you might be able to have funding available contingent on the licensure. So right now you do not need to have all of the funds immediately available before applying for this license type.
But the sources of funds will be required, right? You'll need to show
Correct.
where you're planning to get the investment from in the future.
Yep, you'll need to detail that. If you have ideas on it right now, you'll need to disclose that. And then let's say you find additional sources of investment at a future date, you'll need to disclose that to the Office of Cannabis Management.
Okay, great. Yep, I think we got that one then. Let us know if we didn't answer your question. We'll move on to the next one here. Is 26% woman and 25% minority good enough to hit the 51% social equity guideline? Or does it have to be 51% owned by one person who meets the criteria?
So you can have an application like that. You can have, let's say, a team of 10 women who each have 5% or 6% ownership in the business. And together that gets you to that 51% ownership or that sole control stake that would qualify you. So right now it seems like you'd be able to qualify with a 26% women owned and 26% minority owned business. You'd be able to combine those and reach that 51% threshold.
Great, thanks, Dalton. And I think also maybe something just to keep in mind is with those the grading groupings that we talked about, it may just cause some confusion if you're both in the woman group and the minority group when it comes to the evaluation process. So we'll just want to be, you want to be clear in your understanding of how the application process and evaluation is going to work when you're applying under that strategy. All right, let's see if we have any other questions here. I know we're getting really close on time. Just a few minutes left. Let's see. Just a quick question. Has the Cannabis Control Board published the revised regulations? Did they actually go through with publishing them yet? And yes, so answer that one. Yes, they're in the register now and available for comment. So those revised regulations came out and then were officially put into the register for public comment. And that ends July 31st, that public comment period.
And if you are interested in reading a 300-page regulatory document just for fun, they are available to read on the Office of Cannabis Management website.
Yes, certainly. I mean, as part of educating yourself, reading the regulations is right there at the top of that list. I think that one hopefully goes without saying that you should be reading through the regulations, not solely relying on Dalton's genius here at Canna Advisors, but definitely getting in there yourself and understanding it with the light of on your business and what you're trying to do. Okay, cool. Looks like we're just about out of time and I don't see any other questions. Any other questions that you see, Dalton or Kenzie?
No.
Do we need to hit on? Okay. All right, everybody. Well, I think with that, then we can wrap it up here right on time. I really appreciate everyone taking an hour out of their day to listen to us talk about New York. Again, please reach out if you have any questions. My email is summer like the season, but with one M at thinkcanna.com. Dalton's is dalton@thinkcanna.com. You can also reach out on our website. Feel free to send over any questions. We also, in addition to application services, license pursuit services, financial modeling, business planning, and pitch decks, also offer hourly consults. So if you just have a few questions, you want to talk to us for 30 minutes or an hour, you can schedule that very easily just right on our website. So, and then lastly, if you want to meet up in New York at any time, just shoot us a message and we're happy to meet up, find a time to meet up in New York. All righty. And with that, I think we can go ahead and sign off. Thank you all so much. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday.
Thank you, everyone.